We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Chof, volume 20, the second Sicha for the Parshas Breishis. This is a Rashi Sicha, and the Rebbe goes through explaining the Rashi that talks about the prohibition originally for man to eat meat, and this was only permitted to them later on by the Bnei Noach, where Hashem permitted them to eat meat. But in the beginning, the people and the animals were equal. They can only eat vegetation. The Rebbe comes up with a very interesting, novel idea over here that the truth is that the people originally were not allowed to kill the animal and eat the meat. That has to do with the fact that Hashem, while he said Urudu, that they are in charge over the animal kingdom, but it doesn't give them a right to kill. But if the animal is killed, the meat, they can eat the meat. That's if you look in Lashon Rashi. Rashi says he hasn't given them permission. The Rebbe explains beautifully the different wording in the Rashi, which says very clearly that the people at the time originally didn't have a right to kill the animal to eat the meat. And that's why even when Hashem permitted them to eat it, it wasn't because of their authority over them, but that's why it says Kiyerek Esav, as we will see in the pasuk. But let's go step by step. Aleph. Nachdem wie die Teure erzählt wegen der Bria von Chayos Haaretz und Brias Odom wie Ishtoi bei Yom HaShishi L'Maaseh Breishis. After the Torah relates what happened on the sixth day of creation, the creation of the animals of the land and the creation of man and his wife, Odom v'Ishtoi. This happened on the sixth day of creation. So the Torah tells us Hashem created the animals and he created man and his wife, the man and his wife, Odom and his wife. And then, in addition, also the pasuk says, "Koilel dem dibur." The pasuk also includes the saying from Oberstun to Odom v'Chava, that what Hashem said to Odom v'Chava, "Vayivorech goimer." Hashem blessed them, and He told them, "Pru urevu, be fruitful and multiply, uredu b'tgas hayom, and be dominating over the fish of the sea." Goimer, etc. So these are the original psukim, but then the Torah adds something about what they're allowed to eat. Stay in Torah zwei psukim. Then there's two verses in the Torah. B'shayches dem Michael from dem Odom und the Chayes v'chulu, in connection to the food that the person and the animals can eat. So first it talks about their creation, and then the Torah gives us two psukim about what food they can eat. So by Yomer Elikim, what does the pasuk said? Elikim said, "Hine nosati lochem es kol esav zoreya zera goimer." I am, behold, I've given to you all grass that sprouts the seed. That should be for you to eat. The pasuk, second pasuk says, "Ulechol chayas haaretz," and also to all the animals of the land, v'chol eif hashamayim, and all of the birds that fly in the sky. Eskol yerek esav la'achila, all vegetation, the grass, is for their consumption. Those are the two psukim. So is Rashi meitig b'pirushei dem Siyum von ersten Pasuk zusammen mit der Haschola von zweiten. So Rashi quotes from the Pasuk. In his commentary, he brings down the end of the first Pasuk together with the beginning of the second Pasuk. He puts them together as the heading of the Rashi. Lochem yelo ochlo ulechol chayas haaretz. It should be for you and for all the chayas haaretz. Unis mefarish. And Rashi explains. Hishva lohem behemois b'chayes leMichael, that Hashem made equal to the human, the behemoths and the chayes. As far as eating goes, the behemoths and the chayes and the human are equal. Hashem did not permit for Adam and his wife lehomis beria to kill a creation, v'lechel basar, and to eat meat. Ach kol yerek esav yochlu yachad kulam. But all grass, the vegetations, that they can all eat together, the animals with the human beings. What is Rashi coming to tell us here? So it explains that the Adam can only eat that food which the animals eat. So the pasuk is telling you that the Adam can eat only what the animals can eat, and therefore the Eibishter did not allow for Adam and Ishtay, Adam and his wife, to eat meat. The Pashtus learned. So simply, how do we learn? We learn the Rashi, Ados was hishva lehem behemes v'chayis leMichael, that he compared to the Adam, the behemoths and the chayis, the animals for eating. They're the same as the animals. Is Lamed, this is coming to teach us, as Adam v'ishto zayne given osur b'achilas basar, that Adam and his wife were prohibited in eating meat, and they're the same as the animals. Bider Gur Aryeh is mefarish, as the Gur Aryeh explains. Ma behema v'chaya einam oichlim rak esav, just like the tame and undomesticated animals only eat grass, hochinami, likewise the same thing. Adam achilose esav v'yerek, v'loy midei achiliz. A person can eat only grass and vegetation and nothing else. Very difficult to understand. How could we equate and say, just like an animal doesn't eat meat, plenty of animals that do eat meat, so why are we saying it doesn't eat meat? So that's number one. How could you say you can't eat meat because it's the same as animals? Animals don't eat meat. There's some animals that do eat meat. And on the other hand, the Rebbe is going to ask, why do we need to equate them? The pasuk says beferish that nosati lochem es kol esav, that they can only eat vegetation. Why do we need to equate it? Something is amiss over here. Let's look inside. The pashtus es zober wieder levush frekt, but this is difficult as the levush acts. It's difficult to explain as such. Aleph, number one. How can we? Because the Hashem equated to the human beings, the animals, the tame and the undomesticated animals are raised again. How can we derive as the Adam tornit essen kein basar, that the human cannot eat meat? How do we see it? If you're equating it to the animals, what do we see? Actual, practically speaking, as kama v'kama fun chayis, that many animals, zainen chayis turfis, that are animals that attack animals, that eat meat of a behemoth. So if you're equating it to the animals, how do you learn from this that you can't eat meat when the animals, there's many of them that do eat meat? Now, the Rebbe says there is an opinion that animals originally didn't eat meat. It was only after uh, the sin of the Tzadas, eventually that they became uh, animals that attack other animals, but became turfis. But the Rebbe says Rashi doesn't mention it anywhere, so it's not that Rashi believes that initially these animals did not eat meat. So how could we, by equating the Odom to the animals, say that he can't eat meat when the animals do eat meat? It's very difficult to say. As Rashi held with the Shita that Rashi goes by, holds like the view. As koidem hachet seine nit given ken chayis turfes, that before the sin there were no animals that would attack others, eat meat, nor der noch durch ein Chet ist the Stande geworden sehr teba. It's only that later on, through the sin, that their nature changed. Weil Azar Chidush Godel wird Rashi ergets wo beferisch ala Teure gedarft sagen. Such a great novelty that there was a change in the nature of the animals that they only became turfus later on. Rashi should have said it. Ergets wo beperusha ala Teure gedarft sagen, oder akol ponim Ramazain, at least hinted for it. So doesn't really fit to say that Rashi's view is that the animals did not eat other animals beforehand. So how could we learn from equating to them that the person equating the person to the animals that the person can't eat meat? The Rabbi Mizrahi learned. He says differently. He says it's not that the animals don't eat meat. The equation is just like the animals don't attack a person, they have no right to eat the person, or the person has no right to eat them. Not that the animal doesn't have a right to eat meat, but it doesn't have, the equation is from the animal not allowing to eat humans, so the human is not allowed to eat the animal. That's the equation. The Rebbe Yom is Rachel them Pshat in Hishva. What does it mean compared from Odom to Chayis, that we compare the person to the animal? As kishem v'loy hutar l'chaya lechel es ha'odom, just as it was not permitted to the chaya to eat the human, kach lehutar la'odom la'mizberia. Likewise, it was not permitted to a human to kill a creature, a created being, to eat lechel b'sora, to eat its meat. But the Rebbe says this is a very difficult to say so. Says, "Aber adoichek to learn, and this is very difficult to say. Adosis kavanas Rashi, that this is Rashi's intent. Warum demult is hoiker choser min sefer. In that case, the main thing is missing from the book, from what Rashi is writing. Rashi gedarf der Monen dem Isur von Chayis lechelas Odom. Rashi should have mentioned the prohibition of animals to eat the human being. The Rashi only brings down lechel basar, not eating the lo'odom lishtel hamisberia v'lechel lechel basar, but Ishlam behemoth chayla Michael doesn't say anywhere that the behemoth is not allowed to eat the human. This talks about the generally basar. So question remains. So we have the question: how could we learn from equating it to the animals that a human being is not allowed to eat meat when the animals, some do eat meat, base, and then idach gisa kekushta gur arya. And on the other hand, as the gur arya asks, why do we even need to compare to tell you the person can't eat meat? That says in the pasuk itself. Noch was darf man onkumen zum hekish. We have here this equation. Since the Torah equated the human to the animal, so therefore they can only eat the same food. So we learn from this as Odom v'ishto zayin osur b'achilas basar, that the man and his wife are prohibited to eat meat. Man weiß doch das von Mashmos Pshat HaKosov. That we know from the meaning, simple meaning of the pasuk. The pasuk sagt, the pasuk says, "Hine nosati lochem es kol esav goimer." I have given to you all the grass, lochem yeh lochla. That should be for you to eat. The Eibishter hat matir given. The Hashem permitted Achilas Yerek Esav to eat the green, the grass. Ubelshein Rashi Besim Pirushay, as Rashi language in the end of his commentary, that this was already a right that Hashem gave. It's not also granted that he could eat just the vegetation just on his own. Hashem allowed him to that. Kierek Esav, Rashi says, Shehitarti La'odom Horishen. That it should be like in the end, the Rebbe will quote soon the Rashi, that like the grass that I have permitted to Adam Rishon, which means that Adam Rishon was permitted to eat that. That's the only thing he was allowed, this haste. As Yerek Esav is hitarti, that means that the grass, the vegetation I allowed, but nothing else, basar, not basar, because if the Torah just give you a sample of what he can eat is one thing, but here it's a permission. So we don't find a permission for basar, so it means that he wasn't allowed basar. So why do we need the equation? Because we're going to equate it to the animals that we know that basar is prohibited. So first, these are two questions. First, the Rebbe asked, how could we even learn that a person is not allowed to eat basar from the equation to the animals when the animals do eat meat? And number two, why do we need the equation to tell you that you don't eat meat when it says in the pasuk befedish? And third, gimel b'chol oifun. Either way, this is what's problem of Rashi? In Pshuta Shel Mikra, the Rashi is coming to answer over here. V'ikar inyone shel pirush Rashi al haTorah. What is Rashi's job? What does Rashi do in the commentary on the Torah? Is lafadesh Pshuta Shel Mikra, is to explain the simple meaning of the pasuk. Vos is do shver in Pshuta Shel Mikra? What is difficult in the simple meaning of the pasuk? Was Rashi kommt far entferen mit sein Pirush, that Rashi is coming to answer with his commentary, Hishva lahem behemas v'chayis l'maychol chulu, that he equated to the humans, the animals, and the undomesticated animal for eating, etc. What is Rashi's problem that Rashi is coming to answer over here? So that's general Rashi. But then there is some specific details in Rashi, which is also going to be a clue to the Rebbe's interpretation in Rashi. That Rashi uses the language that Rashi uses here. Rebbe is going to explain the various different seemingly extras that Rashi brings down, but that will give us the clue to what Rashi's real pshat in Rashi is. Oich zayin and faran base. Oich zayin and faran kamo diyukim. There's also several questions here in Loshen Rashi, in Rashi's language. Aleph. Farvos nutz do Rashi al Loshen bilti rogil. How come Rashi uses an uncommon language? He says, v'lo hirsha. He didn't allow them to kill the animal and eat the meat. Why does Rashi say he didn't allow them instead of saying he prohibited them? Asignan shel sipur. This is a style of a story. He didn't allow them. Or doesn't write in his usual style. Aval basar asur, but meat is prohibited. Or similar to that. Why does Rashi use the last base? And we'll see all this how it gives out the theme, as the Rebbe explains, that this gives out the whole idea in Rashi, as we'll see in a minute. Base. Rashi is Moshe from Medayik. Rashi adds, and he says precisely, specifically, he says, as der Isur al Odom v'ishta is, what is the prohibition for a man and his wife? Is lahamis birya belechel basar, is to kill a creature and to eat meat. Onit bekitzer ubistama, doesn't say short and in a general way. V'lo hirsha la'odom u'li'ishtoi lechel basar, he did not permit man and his wife to eat meat. It says very specifically to kill the animal, to kill a bria and to eat the meat. Was the funis mashma, from that it appears, l'chayra, as achilas basar fun amesamei leo, to eat meat from an animal that died on its own is mutter, is permissible. But you can't kill it to eat the meat. What forces Rashi to say this distinction in Pshuto Shel Mikra, that you're only not allowed to kill it and eat it, but you could eat it if you didn't kill it, if it died on its own. Gimel, number 3, to Levos Darf Rashi, Iber Chazar and Barichas. Why does Rashi need to repeat again and at length? Ach kol yerek esev yochlu yachad kulam, but all the vegetation, they should all eat together. Nogdem vi Rashi hochen freyer geret wegen dem isur achilas basar. Rashi had already spoken before about the isur of meat. What does he have to say? Yerek esev yochlu can eat it together. We see the isur basar, and then everything else is as the pasuk says, befrat, as in pasuk state befedish, as yerek esav is laachla. That's for eating. Saila odom saila chayzaris. Vos gitzu darichas anal. What does this add? And the Rebbe's explanation is that Rashi is actually coming to explain a whole other issue over here. Why we find the pasuk telling us in the middle of creation. Why is the pasuk all of a sudden? Rashi's problem is, why is the pasuk in the middle of creation telling us about what they can eat? Why is that important? And that is what really Rashi is coming to explain, and that even though that Hashem gave them redu, dominance, but Lo Hirshoi didn't allow them. And that's why it's only also if they kill the animal, but not if it dies by itself. And that's why Rashi adds again, reviews, to say to you that you can eat together as for food, but not as dominance, as to emphasize this, as we'll see in the Rebbe's explanation. But before we go to the next set of questions, I gave a little bit of what the Rebbe is going to answer this. Gimel. Weiter is Rashi mamshich. Further, Rashi continues. Later on, when the Bnei Noach came around, then Hashem allowed them meat. Shenemar, the pasuk says, after the Mabul, that called the Remes Asheru Chai V'Goymer, all living Remes, Kiyerek Esav, She Tarti Lodim Horisha. Just like the vegetation, the grass that I permitted to the first man, to Adam Arishan, Nasati Lachem Eskoil, I've given you everything, that you can also eat the animals, the living things, as well as. So Rashi bring down that the prohibition was only temporarily for the time being, but not for the future. Now, we know Rashi doesn't usually address things, psukim, that is brought down later on. Why does Rashi address it over here? Because while Rashi doesn't address psukim later on, but facts that the child sees, and he sees that we're eating meat, so Immediately he asks the question, so Rashi has to address it to him. So the tam favos Rashi darf gleich be parsha seinu. The reason why Rashi immediately in our parsha bavornen to caution us as bnei noach hat mematir gewent essen bosser that the bnei noach were permitted to eat meat. His movement is understood. Vigeret kam upon him has spoken many times. As agam Rashi verentered nid bepirusha, even though Rashi doesn't answer in his commentary, he doesn't answer to us. A Schwierigkeit was wird nis eure werden beim Lernen a später dicken Posuk, a difficulty that will be aroused when we'll learn a later on Posuk in Torah Shabiksav, in the written Torah. So we don't have to answer now, technically, why the Pasuk says later on that they could eat it. So Rashi brings down the Pasuk that he permitted them later on. Certainly Rashi doesn't have to address a matter of the oral Torah, which the Torah says that Bnei Noach were allowed to eat later on after the Mabul, after that. And not only does Rashi not have to add matters of Torah Shabbal Peh, Rashi's Pshat doesn't necessarily have to fit with Torah Shabbal Peh. Rashi doesn't have to come and tell us, here I'm telling you that they can't eat meat, but we know that they could eat meat, and Rashi addresses what the Torah Shabbal Peh says, that this was later on, because Rashi doesn't even have to address it, because it doesn't even have to fit. It doesn't matter that what it says in Torah Shabbal Peh, as long as the simple meaning in the pasuk makes sense. So why would Rashi need to address what happened later on over here? Since Rashi's commentary is based on the simple meaning, literal shot in the pasuk, is nitokin hechrech dos mus zayin behesim mit maskonas halacha. So doesn't have to fit with the conclusion of this matter in halacha. So that halacha, they can eat meat because it was permitted later on. Even though in this pasuk it says that you can't eat meat. So this is not a contradiction because this is a new issue later on. But Rashi doesn't usually have to address it, but in this case, it's something which is practically difficult for the child. Because he sees, B'shas or Rashi is mefarish them posik. When Rashi explains the verse for a child who's 5 years old who's learning Chumash, Rashi must take into consideration the facts. As it is seen by the 5-year-old who's learning Chumash. The Rebbe muz Rashi gleich bavorn, and Rashi has to immediately caution and explain. As in the Spete, the Kedoide is that in the later generations, hat man matir given achilas basar, but there it was permitted eating the meat. Borum, der pirush, right? Because if Rashi didn't say anything, and Rashi said he's not allowed to, so I mean, what are you not allowed to? Was der pirush as lo hirshachulu? When Rashi just says here he didn't allow them without commenting that this changed, is vestira to the mitzias was their mechomesh zet. That contradicts the facts that the 5-year-old sees. Al meshechta behemechulum estir basar, that you slaughter the animal and you eat the meat. How could that be if the pasuk says you're not allowed to? So Rashi has to tell him they changed around. This was right now, and there's a change. As is over, nit moving. So while Rashi doesn't have to explain problems that come from the Gemara for other psukim, but Rashi needs to explain problems that come from the facts. If Rashi brings down they weren't allowed to eat meat, how do we eat meat today? So Rashi has to explain this. As over nit moving, but it's not understood the great length of Rashi. Aleph, number one, if Rashi is coming to caution us about this detail, is genug zu sagen blois, then it would be sufficient to just say blois dem din, only the halacha Ukshabo b'nei Noach hitir lam basa kitil kamon. That when b'nei Noach came, he allowed them meat, as we'll see later on. Or the Keyitzah, similar language. Lemainav kemina do. What does it make a difference over here to wissen dem genoyen mocker von dem dinen posuk, the exact source of this halacha that it was permitted in, where it comes from the posuk, to quote the posuk, Yeregesim Sheitarti Lavrom. Why do we need to say it over here? Base. So also the quote from Rashi is also difficult. Even if Rashi wants to bring the pasuk, which part of the pasuk Rashi chooses to quote seems also difficult. Base. If Rashi finds it necessary for some reason, Arab to bring in the pasuk to quote, to bring down the verse, he should have just quoted the beginning of the verse, Kol remes asher hu chai lochem yeh lochlo. All the remes, or creepy, crawly that is alive, you can eat. Was there unis klor? That makes it clear already. As der Eberster hat matik events essen bossa, that Hashem allowed to eat meat. Favos is Rashi, but the way Rashi quotes it, number one, mash midem iker de verte lochem yeh lochlo. Rashi omits the words that you can eat it. And is a blois maramas mitabegoyver. He just hints them by saying, etc. Beis meidach is meisiv da'adichas, and then he does, on the other hand, bring down kierek esek shitarti lod marishan, like the vegetation that I permit on marishan. Asat lechem es koil, I give you everything. Why does Rashi bring down that part and not the part in which you can eat it? You can eat the basar, to tell you that the pasuk says later on. So the Rebbe has, in addition to the beginning of the Rashi, the Rebbe asks also in the second part of Rashi why Rashi quotes from the pasuk. If he wants to say that we see later on you can eat it, so he can just say short, and also the verses that he quotes seem to imply that Rashi has a different intention here, as the Rebbe will explain. The explanation of this, mit sein Pirush, is Rashi oisen zu verentfen Kama Shailes in the Psukim. With his commentary, Rashi, his intention is to answer several questions in these verses. Aleph, number one, was far an Ort hot bechlal zu meidia sein in dem Sipur for Maise Breishis? What room is there? Why do we at all? What's the logic behind telling us in the story of Maise Breishis? We're talking about the act Hashem created. What was mentioned on Chayis Megan and Kenan Essen, that humans and animals are allowed to and are able to eat. We're talking about creation here. What do we need to tell you what they can eat? It seems like we are discussing really the general creation. We're not talking here about the needs of the creation. We're talking about their creations. Why are we talking about their eating? The Breishis, the Rebbe explains like this. So why does it say before also to be fruitful and multiplying? Fruitful and multiplying, that explains that creation has a continuation, but what they can eat, what they're allowed to, doesn't add to this story of creation. The Breishis prudevu goimer, the blessing to be fruitful and multiply, seine nach Chelek for Maise Breishis. So that's part of the Maise Breishis. That's why the Torah includes them. They explain, wie die Bria hat a hemshech v'kiyum, how creation has a continuation and an existence. Ada yem hazeh, till this day. Sie seien nivrig geworden in an Eufen. They were created in such a way, sie sollen sein, porim v'rovim, that they should be fruitful and multiply. Euch is muvan. So, that we understand. We also understand why the Torah gives dominance, tells us about the dominance of the human being. Euch is moving farvos der tzivu redu b'dgasa yom goymer. You should dominate the fish of the sea. Is eingeschlossen in the inyonim from Breishis, is included in the matters of the acts of creation. But das git a tiur von Eufen brias Adam, because this gives a description how the human was created. Sein Ausgeteiltkeit von allen Nivroim, his distinction, his separation of all creations. Wie sagt, as the Pasuk says, Nase Odom b'tzalmeinu kidmusenu, that the person, Hashem says, let's make a person, that's the creation, who is in our image, in our look, v'yirdu b'tgas hayom, so they would, and they will dominate the fish of the sea. Goymer was behemshech lezeh that seil der Pasuk, and as a follow-up to saying that Hashem says will create man that can, a specific type of creation who will dominate the fish. And the Pasuk said that Hashem did so. By Yibra was Behemshech said that sailed the Pasuk. First Hashem consulted and said, let's do this. And then the Pasuk relates, by Yibra Lekim, as Adam B'tzalmoi Goymer, he created the person in his image, and Vayemer Lehem Goymer, he told them that they should dominate. Aber wenn es kommt zu die Psukim, but when we come to those verses, that which the human and the animals of the land should eat is nit it's not understood. Was far a shayches hot as to Maaseh Breishis? What kind of a connection does what they can eat and what they can't eat? What is that? How does that relate to Maaseh Breishis? Why are we bringing it down in the middle of the story of the act of creation? Based. And certainly, if you want to tell us what Adam can eat, but why does the Eibishter have to tell Adam what they can eat? Well, that what the animals can eat. The Torah wants to tell them what they can eat, okay, but why would the Torah tell them the animal? Even if we shall find a reason for was der tzivui to Adam, is donageya why the command of the person is important here to tell us what he can eat. But we still don't understand. Zu was hat der Eibishter angesagt Adam wie Ishtoi? Why did Hashem instruct the man and his wife? Was wird sein der Michael von Chayes Haaretz v'Eif HaShemayim? What's going to be the food that the animals of the land and the bird of the sky, what are they going to eat? And what happened until then? Noisef was in addition to that, Tziden hoben the Eifes HaShemayim shenivru b'yom HaChamishi. Did then the birds were not created on the sixth, they were created on the fifth day. They were created Yom HaChamishi, nit gegessen bis dem Onzo Kanal. Did they not eat until this instruction of the above? And we can nicht verantworten. And you can't answer ados kun behemshech. Zum Tzivu Uridgu Bidgas Hayom Goimer. That maybe the reason why Hashem is telling them about what the animals can eat is because since they were dominant and they were sort of in charge, monitoring what the other animals do, because they're in charge, so therefore they have to know what they can eat. So maybe that's why the Eibishter is telling them what the animals can eat. We can't eat for answering. And you can't answer the reason why Hashem is telling Adam v'Ishtoi what the animals can eat. This comes as a follow-up to the command that they should dominate the fish of the sea. Since Hashem appointed them. Also, a dominant of the species of all the living, category of the living. So therefore, he had to instruct them. Was there min hachai darf essen, that which the category of living has to eat? Warum lichayre niet das is der inhoud van no redu. Seemingly, that's not the meaning of dominant or redu, that they should be in charge of what the animals eat. The Rebbe doesn't elaborate in this, but it's understood that they can't control, and that's not control. Redu means the general idea that the person, the people are higher and in charge. They trap them, they bring them, they control, but not to take care of what they eat. So why does the Torah, Rashi wants to explain here two things. First of all, why do we even tell you what the person eats in the middle of act of creation? The other things the Rebbe explains, we understand that they're dominant, that's why there are different categories, that's fine. But why tell us what they can eat over here? And especially, why tell Odom v'ishtoi what the chayes, the animals can eat, what the chay can eat? So this is what Rashi is about. Hey, if to verantworten Odi Shailas to answer these questions, is Rashi mighty from Posik the Verta? Rashi quotes from the verse, the words Lochem yeh la'achla u'lechol chayes oretz. It should be to you, with a vav. And in the pasuk is lechol, but Rashi adds lechem yolachol ulechol chayesoris. Boy zayin mekasher beide psukim. They tie both of these psukim durch avov hamachaber, a connecting vav. Un is mevayer the pirish hakosum. Rashi explains the meaning of the pasuk. Hishvel lehem behemes v'chayes lemaychel. The Eibishter equated to them the behemes and the chayes for eating. They're the same. The kavone from them siyum from ersten pasuk. What the verse intends in the end of the first pasuk to connect bechibur to zweiten pasuk, to connect to the second pasuk, is nit zu sagen isurim, is not to tell us prohibitions that they can't eat what they could and couldn't eat. Nit zu losen wissen was a mensch meg essen was chayis darfen essen, not to let us know that which a person is allowed to eat and that which animals need to eat. The plosik is blois ois, the verse is only intention. Ein zach, one thing here. Matgi zayn de gleichkeit. The Torah wants to emphasize the equality. Then tzad hashova, the common denominator for mention on chayes b'negeya zeir esn. The equality, there's being equal between the human and the animals as far as they're eating l'maych what they eat. The mocker from them isur bosor al odom ve'ishtoi, the source that there is a prohibition for meat for man and his wife, which Lahirsha will see didn't allow them, is not from this equation. The Rebbe asked before, we know that from the Pasuk, that's from the Pasuk. Is taka from Mashmos from Ershton Pasuk. The first Pasuk says, I'm only permitting you vegetation. But their fun was their posik is matlir blois yerek esav. The fact that the Torah only allows for the vegetation is muchach b'derech memela, so that's automatically evident as basar is nit mutar, but that meat is not permissible. But the Torah is aber gleich meisif. The Torah immediately adds, as esav is euch der Meichel von kol chayes oretz v'chol eif hashamayim gomer. That grass is also the feed of the animals of the land and all the birds that fly, birds in the sky. Kedei zu matgish sein die Gleichheit zwischen Odom und Chayes und Behemoth, in order to emphasize the equality between a human and the animals and the behemoths. The Chayes essen take nit nori yerek esem noroich basar. While it's true, we're saying they're equal, the animals eat meat as well. But what we're trying to vergleich is mitzad echad. They were only trying to put them together on one side, not everything, in one side. In Negel Michael Odom. As sein Michael Odom, sein Michael Asap, that the person's eating of the grass is the selbe was Chayes Ubehemes essen. You're eating what they're eating. The grass that you are eating is the same as the animals are eating. Chayes Ubehemes. Und der Fall is Rashi Meidich Chazet Tiba noch einmal der Ashwa. That's why Rashi prolongs and repeats again the comparison. Achol Yerek Esev Yoichlu Yachad Kulam. They should all eat together the grass. What is Rashi trying to tell them? They're trying to tell us here to explain why are we talking about the food, to tell us that the green, the vegetation that the person eats, the human eats, and the animal is the same. Vos is negeya b'sipur vov. Vos is negeya b'sipur brios odom. Why is it important when we talk about the creation of man? So I bringen the hashvoah von sein Michael, so Michael Chayes Ores to bring out the equation to, in the comparison that what he eats is the same as the animals of the land, is movements understood. Früher erzählt der Posik, Mailas Odom auf alle anderen Nivraim. First, the Torah tells us the advantage of the human over all other creation. Is Bashafen geworden B'Tselem Elikim. He was created with the image of God. And therefore he's a Reiter V'Shoilet of alle anderen Nivraim, and therefore he dominates and he rules over all other creation. Uredugan. And as a follow-up, the Pasuk equates you as Hishvalahem Behemas V'Chayis Lamachal, that the Eibishter equated the Behemas and the Chayis to the food of the human. Niet kukendik of sein Hecherkeit, notwithstanding his greatness. Lagabe Sharanivroyim, relative to the other creation, is a Ranivra, he's still a created being. Which Hashem created, in a way, as Michael, that when it comes to eating, was in them is totally their kim funachai. The living has to eat. So the human being, it should be equal to the animals of the land. Was does their mont them odom? This reminds the person as that is themselves that he's also, he needs food to survive, to eat. The same, he's equal to the chayis oritz as far as food goes. So while the pasuk was discussing and trying to tell that there is an advantage of the human being that Uredu B'Tselem Elikim, that he's in charge because of his special status as being born in Tselem Elikim, the Torah is also trying to tell us that you're still the same. They eat, you eat, same like that. To tell us that you're also creation. So why you're saying you're dominant over? How do we say that you're the same as the animal? As bleibt aber nicht verstandig, but it's not understood. The pasuk sagt doch fort. The pasuk still says that you should dominate. He said Rashi mamshich v'lo hirsha la'odom u'le'ishtoi lahamis beri v'lechel basar. He did not allow the man and his wife to kill a creation to eat the meat. Benegeya zu meime sein aberia und essen ihr Basar, as it connects to killing a creation and eat the meat of the kill, hat men bei ihm zugenommen dem koyach v'reshus. It taken away from the person the power and the dominance and the right to design of chayes and to dominate the animals and the domesticated and undomesticated animal. And the far is Rashi medayik. That's why Rashi emphasizes. He says specifically not that it's osur. He says lo hirsha. It's prohibited or similar to that. Weil die hat Goshe do, because the emphasis here is nit oifun isur von achilas basar. It's not the prohibition against eating meat. Nor if them pirush inhalt von the redu. This is to explain the content, the meaning. What does it mean, dominance? Ados is nit koilel, that the dominance does not include Rishus lahamis beri v'lachal basar, a right to kill a creation and to eat the meat. That's not included. So lo hirshalam. And Rebbe has, so how does Rashi know that? But stop meat he can eat. Rashi. We also understand Rashi's reasoning as the isur fun basar is not lahamis beri v'lachal basar. The prohibition against eating meat only applies to kill the creation and eat the meat. The Baal does the Yisoid from them Isur, since the basis for the prohibition is to shelu zayin from them Odom, benegei Michael. Since we're coming to reject from the person as it relates to his food, the zach von of chayes oretz, we're trying to take away. You're eating, you're equal to them, and you're not, don't have the dominance of the animal of the land. Is move on. It's understood that those batzitzich davke fafal from hom is beri v'lechel basar, only in a case to kill the creature and to eat its meat. So, since the Baal as there is certain miseries to shelu zayin from the modem and negay lamaichel, as the person's food to negate, take away from him the zach from the rudu of chayes oretz to damen chayes oretz, is move on. Then it's understood that those basitzich davke if afal. So this only goes in a case from the hamis beri v'lechel basar, to kill the creature and to eat its meat. To eat the meat in a way that you kill the animal and then you eat it, weist as it is the moishel v'sholet, that points that you're dominating, you're ruling of the chayis over the animals. Bizar megze meimizayin, to the extent that he can kill them, kedei zu essen mibesorim, to eat from their meat. So that's why Rashi says, no, you can't do that. That you can do. Aber by mesimei leho is nito oder tam lesser achilas basar. But if it dies by itself, there's no reason to prohibit the meat. So when the Torah, we learn out from the pasuk kiyerek, only vegetation, it means only vegetation that you're and not meat that you kill. But if it dies on its own, that would be okay. And we need to tell you that because the pasuk is trying to equate and tell you as far as it comes to the food, in the aspect of what you could eat the vegetations, that's you're equal to the animals. You can't go ahead and kill an animal in order to eat the meat. Zayin leidem is move on the arichas loshen Rashi b'sei perusha. We also understand the lengthy Rashi language in the end of his commentary. Shas Rashi bavorn vitzu b'nei noyach is niter gevorn bosor. When Rashi cautions us how the b'nei noyach meat was allowed, permitted, vert shver, we still have a problem over here. That Isul Hamis Beri V'Lechel Basar is gekommen bavorn the modem. The prohibition, why can't he kill the animal to eat the meat? It's not so much, we're not talking about the prohibition against eating meat. We don't give him the dominance. The person does not allow to kill. It came to caution that the person shouldn't do this act in order to get to the meat. As is only vergessen, as that is nicht mehr vanivre, he shouldn't forget that he's just a created being. Now, is then darf b'nei Noach nit haben odi bavarnish. So do the sons of Noach not need that cautioning? They shouldn't kill animals to eat meat. So what are we saying that, oh, we allow them? Faris Rashi mairich or maitik them posik. And that's why Rashi prolongs and quotes the verse where state that heter, in which the allowance for meat is brought. The Bayis Rashi Aleph maitik them siyum posik. He just quotes the end of the posik. Kiyerek ace of goimer as the vegetation base is moisuf of mefarish in loshen aposik kiyerek ace of, like the she tarti lo marishin, that I permitted other marishin. With them dieted on Rashi. Rashi points through that. Ados was what matir given bosel ibnei neyach. that this that it was permitted meat for the Bnei Noach is nit val by zeh is nit negay. It's not because it's not important, doesn't connect to cautioning. Die Bavornish, the cautioning, Begrenzung for Redu, that they should limit how much dominance not to kill the animal to eat it. Benegay lemeichel as far as eating go. Nor she's a heter mitzad demselben tam. But the reason why they allowed is for the same reason. Gleich zu dem tam was der Eibishter hat matig v'yerekesef. It's similar, just like the vegetation. Why do I allow you to eat it just like the vegetation? Shetarti lo'odem arishain. I permitted him. Why did I permit him? That is for being alive and being healthy. So you can even kill the animal if you need to. But that's the reason, not because we don't need the cautioning, but it's the same. It's the heter like by Adam. The father lost Rashi is the verte lochem la'achlo. Rashi amidst the words you should beat you for eating. While do is nit negeya the heter from achilas basar. Because here it's not important the allowance that you can eat meat, nor der tam heter. But here it's important the reason of the heter. Ados is kiyerek esav shi tartil on bishachulu. Just like over there, the Torah permitted it because that's necessary for your food. The same thing over here too. By Odom, the Abishter allowed them because that's necessary for their consumption, for their food. But that's why it's not about what they can eat, but it's the reasoning what they can eat. But it doesn't change the dominance. It's not because of dominance, because that we needed the caution by Odom Arishin. But over here, because of the health for the life and the health of the person, Hashem permitted them just like He allowed for Odom Arishin to eat, because that's necessary for his life and his health. So now the Rebbe learns the lesson that we can learn from this Rashi, the way the Rebbe teaches that while the Eibishter says that the Odom is Redu, that he should be dominant, yet he needs to feel that he's a created being. The Hero der Funin Avodas Hashem. Yes, the lesson from this in the service of Hashem. Ha'amur, this that we said as der Odom darf zusammen mitun uredu, that a person together with being dominant, wissen und margish sein, to know and to feel, feelun as is nit mer v'anivra v'chulu, to feel that he's not, but he's only a created being, chulu. Is nit nor zu bewarnen von Geive. That's not just to caution the person from not being arrogant. Uninyonim biltiritsuim, and for undesirable matters was kennen ariskumen that may result von nit richtig verstehen dem Urdu, from not properly, correctly understanding what it means to dominate. So that's not the only reason why he should feel as a created being, because otherwise it will lead him to arrogance or he'll misuse his power. Nor vegamze iker, but also this is also a main part. In them hanged up their Urdu. That being able to be Urdu hinges upon the person realization that he's just a created being. Pshas a mensch tracht, as der Urdu meint, as is the Reide, when a person thinks that what does Urdu means, that he is the person, he is the one that is the dominant. With his power and the strength of his hand, demult ken nit Reuter sein. Then he cannot really be dominating. Weil is hashove, because in essence you're equal. An nivro ve'ala nivroim. You are a created being like all other created being, and you cannot, therefore, dominate and Reide the other ones. Dafke when er gedenkt dem emes. It is specifically when you remember the truth, as er is shovet zu alle nivroim, that you are equal to all creations. Und sein Koyach zu Reide sein kommt nur von Obersten. And that the power that you dominate comes from Hashem. Davke demult kener sein Reide amiti. That's when you can be a true dominant, is if you know that you are a created being and you know that it comes from Hashem and it's not you. Es ist nicht sein Redia, it's not you are the one that is dominant. Not Hashem lekecho, hu anesim lecho koyach las Yisrael, quoting the pasuk. It's Hashem, your God, that gives you the strength to do this success. Comes from Hashem, ubemela, and therefore is the emissary dia umemshola from the Mebersten. So who is the true dominant and who is the one who is governing? That comes from Hashem, the Beira Ha'odam Umanhiga, the creator of the person and the one who leads him. That is the one. Hashem is the one, because it's not the person himself when he knows that he is just a human being like everyone else. That brings about that it's Hashem who gives him the power to do the Ridiya. That means that Hashem is the dominant. Kapirush Rashi, Oif v'yirdu b'dgas hayom. Rashi interprets when it says that you should be dominant on the fish of the ocean. Goimer yesh beloshen hazeh loshen ridui veloshen yiridu. Rashi says this language can also be in a way of dominating and also be a language of descent. And Rashi explains, Zocha Roide, if you had a merit, then you dominate Chulu. Lo Zocha, if you didn't have a merit, Nase Yorud Lifneim, then you become Yirdu, you descend before them. And then the animal dominates and rules over the person. Was there Pirush Apnimi Bazaiz? What's the inner meaning of the word Zocha or Lo Zocha? Zocha from Lashon refinement. If you are refined, then Roida. Lo Zocha, not refined, then you descend. Zocha from Lashon Zichuch. Zocha comes from the language of refinement. Ois geedelt, to become refined. B'shas ha-mensch edelt sich ois. When a person refines himself, that is oisgeton from gaiva from yeshus, he takes himself out from arrogance and from self-centeredness, self-feeling of self. Nor geht bekoiche von Obersten, but he goes with the power of Hashem. So that means Zocha, he refined to appreciate that. He is not full of himself, but he appreciates and he's refined that it's everything Hashem is giving him the power, is Roida Bohem, then he can dominate over them. Shas Ober Lo Zocha, when he's not refined, hat sich nicht genug mezachich gewen. He hasn't refined himself sufficiently. Feelt sein Yeshus u'metzias. He feels, he senses his self, his entity. Feelt, he feels as dos was is reide is mitzat koiche. The fact that he's dominant is because of his strength, his power. Demot is nasa yorud b'fneim. That's when you actually descend. You're not only not dominating, but you become descent and you fall before them. Nit nor vaser is b'shavet zu alle nivroim. Not only are you equal to all nivroim and not higher than them, nor noch mehr, but more than that. Steht niedriger von sei. You actually standing lower than them. This is also the inner reason for was der Eibishter, why Hashem hat behemshach zum Zivur Redu Goymer angesagt. why, as a follow-up to the command, dominate, Hashem said, as Hishvo lahem behemoth v'chayis l'meichel, he made them all equal for food. Today, as durch dem soll zukommen, in Achonas beöffnen von der Redu, in Avonas beöffnen von Redu Canal, so that way you will be able to reach understanding how you should be dominant is by knowing you're equal with the behemoths, and that's why your lack of superiority in your own self, but attributing to Hashem, that helps you that the redu should be in the right way, the dominating should be the right way, kinal, as we said before. Oistes. From this, we can take the lesson also for our times. Amru Chazal, our sages of blessed memory, said, Atem kruyim Odom, that you, the Bnei Yisrael, are called Odom. As der Iker Toyar Odom, the main description of Odom is an Yidden. So when we talk about Uridu to Odom, it's mainly describing Yidden. And the Eibishter sagt zu Yidden, Hashem is saying to the Yidden, Uridu, Koimer, that Yidden should be dominant, their state. As the Pasuk says, V'omdu Zorim, V'rou Tzonchem, that the stranger, the not Yidden, will stand up and they will be the ones shepherding your sheep. And that means as Yidden werden Rede sein, the Yidden will dominate, as far as, not talking about dominating even other areas, but as far as work goes, bis as oich bisman hagolus, to the extent that even during the time of exile, when the seinen melochim besorim, when they are kings and sorim, that's why we say, is kinemar hoyu melochim oimnayich v'soroi seyem enikasayich. The kings will be the ones raising you, and their princesses, the women's sorries, they will be the nursing. Basically, they will serve the Yidden as far as work and the other things go. That will happen while this is Malachim Musarim. When Mashiach will come, they won't be the Malachim Musarim. That means even at the time of Golus, that they will be serving the Yidden. Is in them the Hira. So what is the lesson? A person will rely on his power and the strength of his hand. Even if he's going to hinge this. In Denvos it is Odom Adam Elyon. He's an Odom. He says, I am compared to the above. You have great talent, you have great advantages. Baal Milas Gedolos, you have great advantages. Thus is Zaine Milas. If you feel that it's yours, it belongs to you, your power, the strength you have, then you have not refined. The animal dominates you. Not only that the nations do not treat you with respect, like somebody who dominates them and rules them, but on the opposite, he's not only not dominating, to the extent that also in his own feeling, he falls down before them, and for Goyishkeit in general, he's inferiority. He feels a complex of inferiority. If he is thinking that it's he, then he falls for them. Dafka ben Zocham. Specifically when he is refined, that is Zich Mezachich. He refines himself. That it's Hashem, your God, gives you strength. So just like we explained with regards to the Chayis, literally the same thing is with regards to the Umas Ha'olam. The Odom versus the Umas Nikisayach, so to say, Nikisayach. So if he appreciates the fact that it's Hashem that Hashem is the one that gives you the strength to become successful. He doesn't go with his own wisdom and understanding, nor lahavdil b'chochmosek from the Ebersten, but rather he goes with the wisdom of Hashem. Torah Shulchan Aruch, the Torah Shulchan Aruch, 40 Leut de Heroes from Ebersten. He follows the instructions of the Hashem. Ergeit b'koyach hamishaleach. He goes with the strength of the sender. Demult is roida. That's when he's dominant. Mizet begoluch, and you see openly the v'hoyu melochim oimnayich goymen noch bisman hagolus. While in Golus we see the melochim become oimnayich. If you are zocha, if you are refined, and if you follow the Shulchan Aruch, not your own, then the Goyim become openly, we see that they become the supporters and the helpers for the Yid, also Bisman Hagolus, Damas Golus. Biz Mikum Tzu, till we reach V'amdu Zorim V'ro Tzeinchem, that the strangers, non-Jews, will stand and they will shepherd your sheep, Bebias Mashiach Tzidkenu, with the coming of a righteous Mashiach. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Breishis, Tovshin Membeis.